How's it going, guys? This is Top Down with TCM. I'm your host, Azaan Barlas. Of course, you guys know my co-host, Jason Cruz. We're both in the healthcare sector for TCM, and we're with a very special guest today. We're with Skylar Moyer of the hardware sector. Now, Skylar, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, my name's Skylar Moyer. I transferred to Fullerton from Saddleback City College, and I immediately came into TCM in my first semester at Fullerton. So I took a couple summer classes just to get in, and I've continued taking classes during the summer and winter breaks to keep me accelerated. So I'll actually only spend 3 semesters at Fullerton and wrap it up at the end of this year.
Dang, that's
Nice.
wow. That's really quick. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's definitely some accelerated education right there.
Yeah. I'm definitely, I'm a little older as a transfer student, so kind of getting it done and being as efficient because I haven't been working, especially with the pandemic lately. So it was like definitely went all in.
That's good.
Yeah, utilize your time wisely. I feel that. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
All right.
Cool. So, Jason, do you want to ask first, or?
Yeah. Okay. I'll go. So Skylar, you being in the hardware sector for our TCM program, I wanted to ask you about the global microchip shortage that has been in the news lately. I just want to get your take on that, and maybe like how long that'll last.
Yeah, this is a really interesting area, and there's likely more questions than there are answers, at least for myself. Maybe some more seasoned people out there can say it, but I think with what we're seeing is like with the growth in 5G currently and, autonomous driving and EV and really this push in all of these different innovating areas, we're seeing a supply or a high demand of chips that hasn't really been met and wasn't being met prior to the pandemic. So what happened in the pandemic was a lot of the companies' supply chains lost and a lot of companies were highly impacted. Some did pretty well. I mean, Applied Materials did really well during the pandemic, and they just were able to secure their supply chain while other companies weren't. As for the future, it's really tough to say. I know that the current administration signed an executive order to try and facilitate some domestic production and really analyze where the United States falls in chip production, which I think what we'll see here is, or maybe what we're seeing is a very low version of chip wars between Asia Pacific and the United States. Right now, Asia Pacific is extremely dependent on the United States, but they're kind of beating us on some different technological aspects. And I think part of this administration's ideal is to kind of keep us within the cutting edge or above the cutting edge. I don't really know who's ahead of who, but I know that it's definitely there, and I definitely think it'll change a lot in the next 5 years. Short term, I think supply is through the roof, and I mean we have more and more supply chain issues this year, I think, than we would see in a normal year between the pandemic and now the Suez Canal blockage and stuff like that. And so short term, we'll see increased prices with probably lower shipments. I would expect companies that are most of the companies, at least closer to the end customer, to do okay, to not really suffer too much as the prices go up. Even though the orders are smaller, they should still benefit them well. I think my biggest concern is in equipment manufacturing. When you have a company like Applied Materials that did so well, a lot of the customers of Applied Materials increased their CapEx spending over 2020 because of the supply chain concerns. And I just read a report where my thesis is that they overspent. And so the companies that lagged in the sector are likely going to do well because their customers weren't spending during the pandemic versus Applied Materials, who is one of the leaders in the sector. They saw a ton of money come their way, So, yeah, it'll be interesting. I think if we see a lot of the government parties go to EV vehicles, whether it's the postal service or emergency vehicles, or we see large shipping companies switch to some type of electronic vehicle, it's going to continue to be an issue. I definitely don't see the short term. Really, I don't see any solution here. I mean, we're still talking. We're going to have to put down plants. We're going to have to get everything, and it'll be good for all the industry as a whole. Most likely, government spending generally does well for them. And if they're going to directly inject some money into equipment manufacturing and chip manufacturing, then there's a lot of companies that should do well.
I think you bring up a really good point about the supply side issue of it. And also, I think a key point in that also is like the unprecedented demand of things. So like people transitioning into like working from home, like their computers just doesn't cut it anymore. They get like a new computer, sudden rise in gaming, cryptocurrency. So there's a lot of factors that play into this.
Yeah, it's tough to say what dies out and what grows 5 years from now where we sit. You know, I mean, if they all grow, I mean, a lot of them have been growing. If they continue to grow, we're 2 American plants or 5 American plants might not be the answer. We might have to think much bigger than that. But overall, it's good. I mean, it's good. It's great that they want to invest, and it's great to bring the chip production home. It's going to create more jobs and really have a ton of benefit just beyond the chip shortage that we're talking about. So very supportive of it. How it ends, we'll kind of see. We're in the very early stages. I think we're 45 days into the 100-day short review period for the executive order. And we kind of talked that the short review and the long review, and there's no timeline for the long review. So, we'll see if a year from now, if action has been taken or if we're still just talking about a chip shortage.
Right.
Yeah.
So knowing all this like pent up demand and like the fact that there is a shortage, I mean, is hardware the place to be right now? Is there opportunities?
There's definitely opportunities. I personally, I'm a little bit more selective with the companies that I think 6 months ago, you take a position in a hardware company, you probably did okay. But I mean, right now I'm really more focused on the end product, right? So I want to be with a company who's supplying the end product that's growing. So for me, that would be like, I would look into autonomous driving, EV. So like NXPI or on semiconductors, both create over 40% of their revenue through auto manufacturing. So I think there's quite a bit of stability there. There's going to be some backlogs and some contract stuffs, but I wouldn't just throw we're not at currently the highs that we were at in hardware, but if you look back, not but a few weeks ago, we were. And so we saw the rotation out, and now I think for me, I'm kind of waiting to see the stabilization and really see what people are going to do next if there's some support. There's definitely, if you want to think long term, like we're supposed to be thinking, 5 to 7 years at least, then yeah, there's some companies to make money here. They don't inherently look beautiful because there might be some high ratios, but I think that it'll stabilize a little bit in the short term, and then we'll kind of start to see everything move a little bit higher. Yeah,
it's interesting how you're. It seems like hardware is definitely like growing in market share, especially like after the pandemic. It seems like from what Jason was saying, like people are using it for like cryptocurrency, using it to work from home. Everyone needs chips. So I'm kind of curious, since the market share is probably going to grow in like the next year or two, do you see newer companies emerging, or do you think like the big boys are going to just capitalize and just earn way more?
Yeah, it's a pretty mature industry. Barring any major innovation from a small company, it'd be pretty tough. I mean, there's room for small companies to come in and take market share, but there's not a ton of room for a market disruptor right now, it doesn't seem. Everybody seems pretty stabilized when you look at chips in particular, and then if you look at like equipment manufacturing, everybody kind of has their little niche that they're working in, whether it be memory or display or whatever it is. There's so many. So I wouldn't suspect you could find a small company, but I could be wrong, and it really wouldn't take much outside of a new. I mean, there's a private company that is likely going to eat market share from the display sector of applied materials, that's selling a superior product at a 10% discount for thin film encapsulation, foldable displays, glass phones, right? So like your iPhone, but foldable.
Mhm.
And I think the CAGR on that is like 125%. So it's there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
The opportunity is there, but you got to look a little bit harder. And as far as being a public company, I haven't been able to find them.
Mhm.
But I think those are the areas. I wouldn't look necessarily at semiconductors, but I think displays is a great area. OLED and thin film encapsulation is it's going to be a big area here over the next few years. It seems. It sounds like it as they kind of come up with some new uses. But yeah, it'd be tough.
Small players to
Yeah.
break in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. It's so mature. And I mean, you look at, we got names like NVIDIA, Applied Materials, Intel, and then you look at like Lam Research, TSM, Applied Materials. I mean, those are big names, and that's not, you're trying to take away from Lam Research or Applied Materials. If you're not one of them, it's going to be a little bit tough.
It's
right?
tough, yeah.
So you do see a little deterioration, I think, up until this year. Up until 2020, there was some deterioration for Applied Materials and some of its market share, but it'd be tough to come in. That's for sure.
Yeah. It sounds like for investors, it's like don't try to find that small growth company. Just pick the best out of like the big ones, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, as an individual investor, I think that's the safest, most risk-adverse strategy. I think if you have some disposable income and you're looking to take a risk, that there's probably some companies out there. Fortunately for me, none of my research really delves in there. We have to be pretty risk-adverse, and so I kind of stick in that realm of guys that are going to be around and waiting to see what they can do. I definitely would take a position with the private company if they were public for the thin film encapsulation. It's super interesting to me. But yeah, it's funny because I'm hardware, but that's a portion of the equipment manufacturing. So there's a lot of kind of smaller sub areas to check out other than what we just think when we think semiconductor, which is easy. So.
All right, so I wanted to switch gears on a company that you have particular interest in. So there was a company we spoke off camera about, which was AMD.
Yeah.
I wanted to get your take on it. Why do you see potential there?
Yeah, so I think when I just, I guess as a disclaimer, I entered a position with a small position with AMD recently. And when I took the position, they were down about 20%. And so the whole hardware sector in and of itself would kind of took a beating for a 10-day period as people shifted out. And so what I saw was an opportunity for a company that's growing that I think has quite a bit of demand. And we talked a little bit about this, and I think my best explanation is really that this is a product that people know and people buy. And when I talk to people about hardware that they use, a lot of the hardware that I find them using is provided by AMD. The chip in my computer is AMD. And likely the chip in at least one of yours is AMD. And so I think for me, I kind of have to go to refer back to like Peter Lynch's Beating the Streets, where he's like, go with what you know, right? So I know NVIDIA is a great company. I know AMD is a great company, but I don't see a lot of NVIDIA chips in regular person's computers. And I think as consumers that we have a ton of power, and AMD seems like a consumer's company, as well as much more. So that was kind of my thesis on it. And it's tough not to see a good company who drops 20% off a price that's at least somewhat justified, right? So I guess bottom line is just buying the dip on a good company.
There we go.
Yeah. So.
I also wanted to ask about another company of yours. So just like, I guess we're asking you so much about your companies because it's like, I feel like every time you pitch a report, they've always done super well. So I'm like curious, like on MKSI, I know you wrote it a little while ago, but what did you find that was like unique about them? Why did you like them?
So when I originally wrote the report, there's a lot of catalysts. There's still a lot of catalysts for the hardware industry, and I think we've talked quite a bit about multiple catalysts, and really just I think we have to look at the innovation in the world today, and when you look at kind of what's happening and what's going to be in 5 years, I want to be a part of the companies that are maybe 5 years ahead of their time to some degree, at least in their thesis of what they're doing. And so MKSI it's an equipment manufacturer, and they were a bit smaller than some of the bigger players, so they had a little bit more room to grow. And I actually pulled up my report to kind of look at it, and so they had entered into a new market with a new drilling tool, and that's kind of where the innovation is in the hardware sector. In the equipment manufacturing is when you design brand new equipment, not when you alter the current equipment. And they were able to do that. I think also it should be said that in that time frame, it was pretty tough to miss a equipment manufacturing company over that time period up until about I don't know what it was, 4 or 6 weeks ago when everybody shifted out. So yeah, I mean I'm just some of the stuff it's just 5G, AI, autonomous driving, electric vehicles, big data, augmented reality, Internet of Things. And so if you think of one electronic vehicle and I kind of look at it and I look at how much of what I just mentioned is going to be included in a single vehicle, it's pretty inclusive in that regard. There is going to be some 5G connected devices in the vehicle. There's some level of AI involved with the scanning the guidelines or the reverse parking and stuff like that. Autonomous driving, we've seen that with the Teslas and the Internet of Things. They're all kind of interconnected, and so as those expand, so will the companies that supply the equipment. And as innovation changes, if the equipment changes, that's where I want to be. And it's a high density interconnect PCB tool, and it really just created a better product than what was currently out there. So that definitely drove their price up, as well as an acquisition in that time frame. But it's super tough to sit in my seat and take a ton of credit, because that industry as a whole has had a spectacular go from when we took over in January, and it hasn't really looked back until it was like 4 to 6 weeks ago when it kind of started to stumble. But I would say forward looking, there's probably a flattish outlook, and then I definitely think there's more room to grow, barring a complete correction. If the market corrects, hardware will correct. If it doesn't, I do think that there's still some room to grow. And I can't. I'm not researching companies like Tesla, so I have to kind of these are as fancy as they get for me. So, but it's all connected if you look at it close enough.
Nice.
True. There's a lot of factors that come to play in that. Yeah. So I kind of want to switch gears, unless Jason has another question about hardware.
Go for it.
Okay. I want to talk about so Skylar is portfolio manager of the derivatives portfolio, which is like a new portfolio we introduced in TCM. And for people who don't know, this is a whole new portfolio. It needed a whole new IPS. It needed a whole new everything. And he's kind of one of the pioneers, I guess, in the portfolio. So I really want to know, he has reached out to a lot of us about specific companies that we would like to give him. So I kind of want to know, what is your guys' strategy?
Yeah, so I think right now we're really looking at trying to take advantage of news and price movement in a way that we can kind of anticipate it. We did, I think the best part of what we did was that we had a ton of leeway in setting up the portfolio. So we got to pick a basket of companies that we liked, that we think have some positive outlook or something like that. And so I think everybody's going to have their own different types of strategies. And for me, I'll be particularly looking at industries with news cycles that are interrelated. So for example, if I own AMD, I'm going to be following its competition, and I'm going to see how the competition's doing and what their news is, and kind of try and get the finger on the heartbeat, so to speak, and try and jump the gun, not jump the gun, but be in a position to take advantage of if the sector or the companies are doing well, and just put us in a position to benefit, I guess. And I'm pretty new to derivatives.
I know nothing about them.
It's interesting. It'll be an interesting thing. I think I've gotten a lot into trying to set it up, kind of knowing how hard it's going to be, and there's a lot of kind of hurdles and stuff. Is my number one goal is less about getting trades done and more about setting something up that's systematic that the next class can build off of. I think they're going to be the true beneficiaries of the derivatives portfolio. You know what I mean? They kind of should cut them loose there once we get a bunch of the paperwork and they kind of see it moving.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, we got some stellar team members, and so it's going to be really exciting to see, what guys like Junior and Gabe and JC and Kichi are all capable of doing, so.
All superstars, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been fun. It's a ton of work. I also help the quant portfolio as a co-PM, and they've been gracious to make my workload a little bit lighter maybe than it should be, because I have the derivatives portfolio. So a lot of learning, a huge learning curve, but it's super. I mean, it's super interesting. Both sides, both quant and derivatives, and I'll likely be looking at different strategies for over the summer when I only have one summer class and I have a little bit more free time on my hand, and really try and refine a technique that works for me.
There you go.
Nice. Yeah, on like the outside looking in, like I don't know much about derivatives, and quant sounds super interesting too. So it just seems like it sounds super cool. I just like, it just like was weird in like the middle of the year that we kind of like got assigned to do it.
Yeah.
But I really want to see the fruits of our labor, and like hopefully next class like we can see it being implemented. That'd be so cool.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're the real beneficiaries. Obviously, I think that goes for president scholars and equity. I think we just have a good system in place for that already. But they're the real, just as we were when we came in and we had a good July and August. We hadn't really done much at that time, and we still get some of the credit for that just for showing up. And that's kind of the beauty of class to class, is that sometimes you're not doing a lot of work, but you get a bit of credit, and so it'll be cool. I think this time next year, derivatives and quant are going to be a whole different beast than what we're looking at today, for TCM in particular. So it'll be cool. Hopefully, we stay in contact with Co and kind of see how things are going, because it's a ton of work, and I'd hate to just walk away from it without knowing the end outcome.
Agreed. We want to return on our investment, dude.
Yeah. We put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into TCM, a lot of late nights, and it's definitely because we love what we do, and we're motivated to try and make a change for the portfolios and for the board. So,
well said.
100%. Hire us, please.
All right, so we are wrapping up our time with Skylar. We don't want to keep him too long. This has been Top Down with TCM. I am your host, Jason Cruz, and Azaan Barlas. Thank you, Skylar, for coming out here with us today.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me. It's been a blast, and I always love hanging out with some TCM students, and it's always good conversation. I always learn a little bit more than when I walked in, so appreciate the time, guys.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fade to black.
Fade to black.
All right.